Go to this computer. Boom! Hello! Let me mute this so it doesn't get all crazy here.
Hey,
Hi.
Hey,
Hi. Do you hear echo at all, or is this okay?
it sounds okay.
sounds good.
All right. Okay. Mike, you made it.
I'm so tired. So tired. I've been awake since 3:30 in the morning, man. I'm so fucking tired. But you know what? I'm committed to this thing. I'm gonna see this through.
Look, I have a reminder that's been going off for the past hour. Tell Michael we're thinking about him during the Rome reading room. So
I might tap out after 1 hour, though. I'm not gonna lie to you. Your instructions were good for today. I had to look at it twice. I'm so tired I can't process it. But do you care if we read a different book? You don't care if it's because I got some other books I'm working on. Is that okay?
yes, just as long as you capture the fleeting note and you follow the process, right? I mean, I looked at it like for this to actually work, we're gonna need more than one reference. And I looked at it like, how do you get people engaged to create something that's personalized? Oh, well, let them do what they want to do.
Okay, so just one last question, then I'll shut up. So, but for one of my understanding though is by going through a book, there's like a cascade of ideas in this book. This book happens to have like a lot of really good ideas for me. So the idea is that I'm going to have like a series of following permanent notes eventually, right?
I don't know if it's going to be series as in consecutive. It could be one on this thread of conversation, one on this thread of
Okay.
conversation.
Okay.
What I'd love to see is basically this group Zettelkasting where it's like you have a thread of conversation here, but you have like 5 different sources
Okay.
of 5 different books that are talking about workflow and flow state,
Cool.
or do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the way, tomorrow's video is an hour long.
Wow.
All right.
There is no guided writing exercises moving forward either, at least for the time being. And basically what I do is I spend an hour going through my entire workflow so you can see what it all looks like. Literally going from fleeting note to in the permanent note, Zettelcast and done.
Wow.
And I'll
That's
explain everything along the way. But you know, I just feel like with the progress that everyone's made, there was no other way to do this. Because now you have to see everything. It's almost like I was talking to my assistant about this, and I was telling her how like basically the hardest part is getting people to the gym, right? And I forced every single one of you to write in Rome for the last 3 weeks. So now you already see the benefit of writing in Rome. And so now it's a matter of, let me show you how I do a squat. Okay? All the way down, stick your ass out, all the way down and all the way up. And now it's just, you get to see how I squat. Now you get to try it now. The technique and the mechanics are the easy part. The hard part is getting to the gym. The hard part is getting you to write in Rome and seeing those thoughts happen. But now that everyone's done that, it's like, well, and everyone's done it so brilliantly. I need to come up with an email for the newsletter that Matt McKinley's going to come out, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to listen back to the live session and just pull what people were saying when they were answering the questions. And so yeah, let me just go
I have
ahead.
a couple of questions, Bo.
Yes, Rick.
If we use a different book, like I dipped into a different book as well, just for something different, I guess. But I was wondering if you needed to see the reference material, you need to see the pages that I'm reading.
Is it a physical book?
I mean, yes.
Is there any way you can take a screenshot with your phone so that
I
way?
did. I mean, I found the book on the Open Library Internet Archives.
Even better.
Yeah, so I can.
If you hit Command K, if you're on a Mac, just do name of article and then paste URL here. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I did a screenshot and just put that in the reference note.
And then put the screenshot as a child block underneath so it doesn't get in the way, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
I did.
Yeah, perfect. And then if you put the URL and the link in there, then you're good to go. And then that way we can still follow along, and that way that source is still going to be relevant for everyone.
Okay.
Awesome.
And then the other thing was, do we retain access after the class is over? Do we retain access to that shared graph or?
Yeah, of course. I
Oh.
still have access to Rome Book Club 1.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yes. I do recommend sort of maybe so all the up to day 22 there's been a lot of intense journaling and vulnerability. I definitely recommend sort of after we're done with the 42 days sort of copy pasting all that out, and because it's all on one page it's beautiful. You just copy paste all that information out into your personal graph, and then you can just delete that. You can just delete all your vulnerable stuff, and then people can still see how you created a permanent note, but they don't have to see all the vulnerability in the first 3 weeks. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Yina?
Yeah, I just had a quick question about logistics for a physical book. Is there anything that we would need to do differently if we, wanted to take a physical book excerpt? That's probably my main blocker.
For me, I just at least for what we're doing with it, if you can just take a screenshot of it, and Readwise actually has this great integration where if you take a screenshot, it'll actually like convert it to OCR text. You can do that as well, but as long as you I know Tristan has some cool stuff that you can do with that. I don't personally use it, but as long as you take a screenshot of it and then maybe just like maybe write out the paragraph. I don't know. I just want it to where people can see and read the source material.
That's okay. I won't do it for now. Maybe like I was just thinking down the line how this would work, but we can cross that later. Yeah.
Well, Samantha dictated her excerpt from a physical book. You can do that as well. And that way, at least it's in there. So when we start looking through it, or when other people see like this like collection of permanent notes, they can see how we came to that crystallized thought.
Cool.
Awesome. Okay. Has everyone signed up over in the Rome Reading Room for the reading list? I'm going to open this up. If you go to Rome Reading Room, scroll down to week 4. We have a little readers list here that Samantha, I believe, set up. Yes. I love this. You see that? That's me. Okay. We're on chapter 9.4. The bookmark right here is where we're going to be starting. And how's the zoom, by the way? Is this going to be zoomed in enough?
Looks okay on my end.
Okay. I'm just making sure. Again, all of this is getting recorded as well, but I just want to make sure that everyone can see. Excellent. Okay. Any other questions before we start?
I'm curious what book Michael's reading.
I am too.
What are you reading, Michael?
Yeah. It's you know what? If you're in education, if you work in higher ed, it is a really cool book. It is called "Won't Give Up the Dream," and it's about a school in Atlanta called Georgia State University. And it is for me, because of what I do, won't lose this dream. Won't lose this dream. It is fantastic, and it's a real nuts and bolts. Yeah, won't lose this dream. And it's a nuts and bolts of how they re-engineered the processes to capture students who are constantly following through. Excellent book.
I am well. I'm well.
Who's this dream? Okay, cool.
Just posted it.
Yeah, trying to get Enagic really fired up again, and I lost.
Samantha, would you like to begin?
Okay, first of all, I'd like to take this moment to say hi to Bart, who's sleeping in Poland right now and wasn't willing to get up at 3 a.m. for us this time. So I told him I'd do a shout out for him at the beginning.
Shout out to Bart. We love you.
All righty. And for all of you who joined us, welcome. All right, chapter 9, become an expert instead of a planner. An exclusive use of analytical rationality tends to impede further improvement in human behavior because of analytical rationality's slow reasoning and its emphasis on rules, principles, and universal solutions. Second, bodily involvement, speed, and on an intimate knowledge of concrete cases in the form of good examples is a prerequisite for true expertise. The moment we stop making plans is the moment we start to learn. It is a matter of practice to become good at generating insight and good text by choosing and moving flexibly between the most important and promising tasks, judged by nothing else than the circumstances of the given situation. It's similar to the moment when we had the training wheels of our bikes taken off and started to learn cycling properly. We might have felt a bit insecure at the first moment, but at the same time, it became obvious that we would never have learned to bicycle if we'd left the training wheels on. The only thing we have learned is to ride a bike with training wheels on. Similarly, no one would ever learn the art of productive academic writing just by following plans or linear multi-step prescripts. One would learn only if I could read the script. We lost you, Bo.
Bo is not a very good salesperson for whatever camo is, because every time his video disappears, that screen comes up. So I don't know what camo is, but I kind of have a bad vibe about it because
If you bring
Yeah.
up, if you bring up the Rome research, go into the RBC.
I'm on there right now. So if you guys all want to scoot over to, if you go to the side on the left-hand side to the book,
The book.
and then choose chapter 9.4, we're on become an expert instead of a planner. And I'm about halfway through the third paragraph.
Yeah,
I'll pick that up.
Quick question, guys. If I'm on chapter 9.4, like the actual page itself, how do I pull a link? Like, for example, if I wanted to share this with everyone else in the chat, I couldn't figure out how to pull the actual like link if I'm on the actual page itself.
Do you mean like the reference block?
Yeah,
Like copy reference block?
yeah. Like if I'm on the actual page though, never mind. It's okay. I think I
I
figured it
think
out.
you have to, I think you have to select the text itself and then right click on it. And then I think there's a share button there. And from there, it'll give you, you can copy and paste that somewhere and it'll give you also the URL and everything, all the
Got it.
metadata.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Depends on the book,
Got
but
it.
usually it'll let you do it.
Thanks.
Alrighty. So the widespread praise. Oh, hello, Bo. What are you doing? Okay. For those of you at home watching sideways, the screen keeps flipping on us. All right. So the widespread praise for planning rests on the misconception that a process like writing an academic text, which is highly dependent on cognition and thinking, can rely on conscious decision-making alone. But the academic writing is an art as well, which means it is something we can become better at with experience and deliberate practice. Read one more. Experts rely on embodied experience, which enables them to reach the state of virtuosity. An expert in academic writing has a feel for the process, an acquired intuition for which task will bring one closer to the finished manuscript and what is only a distraction. There can be universally applicable rules about which steps can be taken when. Each new project is different, and each stage of the project, it might be best to read up on something, to review a passage, to discuss an idea, or change the outline of the manuscript. There's no universal rule that could tell one up front at which stage it wouldn't make sense to follow up on an idea, a possible contradiction, or a footnote.
I'm rebooting the computer. You guys just want to keep going here.
Yeah,
Sorry.
whoever's next.
Yeah, that's Roy.
Roy.
All right, Roy Jumper. Roy, your volume's off.
yeah. So the last thing you read was contradiction or footnote. I was messing with my screens here and lost track.
Hey, I know what that's like.
Yeah. Is
that was the
the
last.
starting point, Samantha,
Yep.
to be able to become an expert?
Yes.
Okay. To be able to become an expert, we need the freedom to make our own decisions and all the necessary mistakes that help us learn. Like bicycling, it can only be learned by doing it. Most study guides and academic writing teachers are trying very hard to spare you from that experience by telling you what, when, and how to write instead. But they are keeping you from learning the very thing academia and writing is all about, gaining insight and making it public. And this, by the way, is the reason why you should never ask the teachers of paramedics for help if you find yourself in the admittedly unlikely situation where you can choose the person who should perform CPR on you. In an experiment, beginner and expert paramedics and their teachers were shown scenes of CPR performed by either experienced paramedics or those who had just finished their training. As you might expect, the experienced paramedics were able to spot their kind correctly in almost all cases, approximately 90%, while the beginners were more or less just guessing, approximately 50%. So far, so good. But when the teachers watched the videos, they systematically mistook the beginners for experts and the experts for beginners. They were wrong in most of the cases and only right in about a third of all cases. Hubert and Stuart Dreyfus, researchers on expertise, have a simple explanation. Teachers tend to mistake the ability to follow their rules with the ability to make the right choices in real situations. Unlike the expert paramedics, they did not look at the unique circumstances and check if the paramedics in the videos did the best thing possible in each individual situation. Instead, they focused on the question of whether the people in the videos acted according to the rules that they taught.
Vincent?
Because trainees lack the experience to judge the situation correctly and confidently, they need to stick to the rules that they were taught, much to the delight of their teachers. According to the Dreyfuses, the correct application of teachability rules enables you to become a competent performer, which corresponds to a 3 on their 5-grade expert scale. But it won't make you a master, which is level 4, and certainly won't turn you into an expert, which is level 5. Experts, on the other hand, have internalized the necessary knowledge so they don't have to actively remember rules or think consciously about their choices. They have acquired enough experience in various situations to be able to rely on their intuition, to know what to do in which kinds of situations. Their decisions in complex situations are explicitly not made by long, rational, analytical considerations, but rather come from the gut. Here, gut feelings is not a mysterious force, but an incorporated history of experience. It is the sedimentation of deeply learned practice through numerous feedback loops on success or failure. Even a rational and analytical endeavor like science does not function without expertise, intuition, and experience, which is one of the most interesting outcomes of the empirical research on natural scientists in their laboratories. Chess players seem to think less than beginners. Rather, they see patterns and let themselves be guided by their experience from the past, rather than attempt to calculate turns far into the future. But like in professional chess, the intuitions of professional academics and nonfiction writing can also only be gained by systematic exposure to feedback loops and experience, which means that success in academic writing depends to a great degree on the organization of its practical side. The workflow around the slip box is not a prescription that tells you what to do at what stage of writing. On the contrary, it gives you a structure of clearly separable tasks which can be completed within reasonable time and provides you with instant feedback through interconnected writing tasks. It allows you to become better by giving you the opportunity for deliberate practice. The more experience you gain, the more you will be able to rely on your intuition to tell you what to do next. Instead of taking you from intuition to professional writing strategies, as the title of a typical study guide promises, it is here all about becoming a professional by acquiring the skills and experience to judge situations correctly and intuitively so you can chuck misleading study guides for good. Real experts, Flyberg writes unambiguously, don't make plans.
Like everything's pretty smooth now, right? Fingers crossed. Glenn?
Okay. Attention is not our only limited resource. Our short-term memory is also limited. We need strategies not to waste its capacity with thoughts we can better delegate to an external system. While the estimations of our long-term memory capacity are wildly diverse and rather speculative, psychologists tend to agree on a very specific number when it came to short-term memory. We can hold a maximum of 7 things in our head at the same time, plus minus 2. Information cannot be saved in short-term memory like on a memory stick. Rather, it kind of floats around in our heads, seeks our attention, and occupies valuable mental resources until it is either forgotten, replaced by something more important according to our brains, or moved into long-term memory. When we try to remember something, say items on a shopping list, we just keep repeating the items mentally instead of storing them temporarily in some corner of our brains where we can pick them up later and think about something more interesting in the meantime. But what about memory artists? It might seem like we can increase the number of things we can remember by employing memo techniques, and not just a bit, but significantly. But what we actually do when we use memo techniques is to bundle them together in a meaningful way and remember the bundles up to about 7. Or if recent research is right and the participants in earlier tests have already bundled things together, then the maximum capacity for a working memory is not 7 plus minus 2, but more like a maximum of 4.
Sorry, I'm just unmuted. Let's see, where are we? Oh yeah, I get to read the numbers? Great. Have a look at the number sequence only once and try to remember it right away. 11, 95, 82, 19, 62, 31, 96, 64, 19, 70, 51, 97, 4. I did that from memory, by the way. That's difficult, as it has clearly more than 7 digits, but it's quite easy when you realize that these are just 5 years of the World Cup numbered consecutively. Therefore, you have to remember much less than 7 individual items. You only have to remember 2, the rule and the starting year. This is why it is so much easier to remember things we understand than things we don't. It is not that we have to choose to focus either on learning or understanding. It is always about understanding. And if it is only for the sake of learning, things we understand are connected either through rules, theories, narratives, pure logic, mental models, or explanations. And deliberately building these kinds of meaningful connections is what the slip box is all about. Every step is accompanied by questions like, how does this fact fit into my idea of whatever it might be? How can this phenomenon be explained by that theory? Are these 2 ideas contradictory, or do they complement each other? Isn't this argument similar to that one? Haven't I heard this before? And above all, what does X mean for Y? These questions not only increase our understanding, but facilitate learning as well. Once we make a meaningful connection to an idea or fact, it is difficult not to remember it when we think about what it is connected with. I'll do the short one. While we want to remember some things as long as possible, we don't want to clog our brains with irrelevant information. And the way we organize everyday information makes a big difference, not only for long-term memories, but short-term as well.
Okay. Here, we have to thank Soviet psychologist Gluma Zagnarnik for her insight and observational skills. The story goes that she went for lunch with her colleagues and was very impressed by the waiter's ability to remember correctly who ordered what without the need to write anything down. It is said that she had to go back to the restaurant to get the jacket she left there. Much to her surprise, the waiter she admired just minutes ago for his great memory didn't even recognize her. Questioned about what seemed to her a contradiction, he explained that all of the waiters had no problem remembering the orders and matching them with the guests at the table. But the very second diners left the restaurant, the waiters all forgot them completely and focused on the next group. Zegnarik successfully reproduced what is now known as the Zegnarik effect. Open tasks tend to occupy our short-term memory until they are done. That is why we get so easily distracted by thoughts of unfinished tasks, regardless of their importance. But thanks to Zegnarik's follow-up research, we also know that we don't actually have to finish tasks to convince our brains to stop thinking about them. All we have to do is write them down in a way that convinces us that it will be taken care of. That's right. The brain doesn't distinguish between an actual finished task and one that is postponed by taking a note. By writing something down, we literally get it out of our heads. That is why David Allen's Getting Things Done system works. The secret to having a mind like water is to get all the little stuff out of our short-term memory. And as we can't take care of everything once and for all right now, the only way to do that is to have a reliable external system in place where we can keep all our nagging thoughts about the many things that need to be done and trust that they will not be lost.
So doesn't that mean if we write a to-do list, we won't remember to do it anymore because we like took it out of our minds?
I think it's talking about cognitive load. So the idea of holding the task in your head takes up more mental energy than just writing it down somewhere so that you can transfer that mental energy towards actually processing.
But Samantha, I kind of take that as a personal attack because that pretty much describes how most to-do systems I try work. Like, what's the device that tells me to look at the to-do list? That's what I can't figure out.
Are you Canadian? Because I feel like Canadians are all about they're offended for being offended. That's our thing lately. I just laugh because I wrote down a list on the fridge yesterday night, a very important list to take care of today. And I worked in my office all day and I went down to the fridge at 5 o'clock and I went, shit, I forgot to do all the things on the list on my fridge.
Samantha, Roy, if you guys have questions, I think Chris, Dylan, and I, we're part of a group that's really obsessed with productivity. And one of the things really is like getting things done, that methodology. So if there's questions that we can help with, I'm volunteering the three of us, guys.
Yeah, I'll say I did that one time years ago when I kind of first started reading the Getting Things Done. I had a lot of different projects in my mind. And I just kind of in chapter 1 or 2, he says, just take everything in your head, write it down, just get it out of your head. And I did, and it felt like such a relief. I mean, it felt like such a burden was lifted. Now I probably lost that list and then I went into a panic again, but when I wrote it down, I felt great.
Yeah, the main thing, I think the trick is just to have one capture inbox, kind of like for Rome in your notes. It's like the same thing as for a to-do list, just having a single place where you dump everything. So you never have to worry about being on the fridge, being on a journal, XYZ. But anyways, okay, I'm gonna hop back in. And the same is true for the work with the slip box. To be able to focus on the task at hand, we have to make sure other unfinished tasks are not lingering in our head and wasting precious mental resources. The first step is to break down the amorphous task of writing into smaller pieces of different tasks that can be finished in one go. The second step is to make sure we always write down the outcome of our thinking, including possible connections to further inquiries. As the outcome of each task is written down and possible connections become visible, it is easy to pick up the work anytime where we left it without having to keep it in mind all the time. Possible subsequent tasks are open questions or connections to other notes, which we can elaborate on further or not. It also comes up in explicit reminders like review this chapter and check for redundancies, which belong into the project folder. Or the third option is a simple fact that something is still in our inbox waiting to be turned into a permanent note, a quick and not yet crossed out note in our notebook, or literature notes not yet archived in our reference system. All this enables us to later pick up a task exactly where we stopped without the need to keep in mind that there still was something to do. That is one of the main advantages of thinking and writing. Everything is externalized anyway.
Can I let me just add something to that? You know, tomorrow's video is going to talk about this. How's my audio, by the way? Is that okay? The video seems like it's sharing okay. You know, it's an hour-long video of just me walking through the creation of this permanent note. And by the end of these 42 days, you're going to have a system where you can literally be in the middle of an argument with family members and having dinner and having your phone go off and be okay with it. And it's interesting because when you get into that place where you can trust in a system and you get into that flow state, every distraction that used to stop us and like cause this grinding feeling becomes like this, it's this dodge. And it's like, you feel like, oh, I know what this is. I know, you know, and it's a very interesting feeling. And I just want to put that out there that when he's talking about this, it's also thinking about the decisions. Like when you do GTD, it's like you don't have to make that decision anymore of where it's going to live. And it's sort of like that same idea. It's like when I'm in Fleeting Notes and I'm doing my second pass, I know exactly where it is. I know what's going to happen next. I'm going to go to my third pass and summarize it at the top. Or if I'm in the literature notes, I'm going to do my fourth pass or my fifth pass. And it's just keep that in mind as well as we move forward, that what we want is this, where it's like these distractions no longer distract us because we don't have to decide where it lives anymore.
So just
I have a question specifically on that kind of subject matter that you're on right now. By the way, I'm Curtis. This is my first time on an actual live call. Thanks for having me. You know, okay, here you are, you're taking your various forms of notes. You're actually doing so with a timestamp. You're doing so in your daily journal pages. And in those daily pages, it might be spread out over a day here, a day there, a week ago, a month ago, you know, just all spread throughout. And so that knowing exactly where it lives, and then in your structure of Fleeting Notes, literature notes, permanent notes, and it all being very concise and kind of brought together, are you basically just kind of going through the work with regularity of pasting over through some sort of like text link with alias or something like that, and making it where there's the original maybe lives here versus there, as opposed to it, you know, so that it all shows beautifully as Fleeting Notes and literature notes in one concise place? Could you kind of just elaborate on the workflow of that part of things that gives us trust as to, we quote, always know where it lives?
Did someone answer that? Does someone feel like, well, I don't think we're there yet. Today's video talks about that, Curtis, or tomorrow's video is going to talk about that.
Okay.
Where it's going to show you exactly where the permanent notes live, and it only lives in two places. It lives on your daily notes page, and it lives on the permanent note page itself, or the Zettelkasten. So it only lives in those two.
And I think my question has to do with the interface between the two, and that just the process. What I've been doing is going over to and just kind of bringing things over, but only bringing over the permanent notes. But then that doesn't collaborate the Fleeting Notes very well.
Yes.
And so I'm assuming I'm going to have to collaborate both Fleeting Notes, literature notes, and permanent notes into a structure that's
context. You lose the context of it, right?
Right.
I'm just going to show something real quick. So this is the permanent notes page. You see this? And then say I go in here, right? And
right.
Let me go and close this. And so right now, this is the permanent notes page, and you want to have the context, right? I think it's lagging. Hold on. Oh, we lost it again. Okay, you see this? This permanent note right here is actually this one down here, right? But with one, and it's an inline block reference, which is unique to what Roam does, right? So I click on that inline block reference, and everything in this one block, reference, I have all of the notes that I abstracted from the permanent notes there. And so this is why it's so important just to write everything out, because everything is located inside the block.
Okay, so hang in on this page for a moment. So these individual contributing factors that make, or contributing blocks that make up the literature notes and make up the Fleeting Notes, if spread over multiple weeks of daily notes, how are they congregated into this place? Are you just going through a work of passing them over? That's my question, the kind of like logistics of that process.
When you start on the permanent note, when you start on the processing of a Fleeting Note through all the other different phases, you don't stop. It's like that's why I have the current timestamp, because it's like pushing that snowball down the hill. As soon as you push that snowball down the hill, the first domino is released. The energy from that first domino is released, and then all the other dominoes start falling after it. So then you go fleeting note, literature note, permanent note, relevant note, and you add all the information, and then you get to the end.
Are you essentially assuming an uninterrupted workflow? Basically,
No, you can be interrupted, but you're not gonna stagger like the fourth pass with the permanent note like days in between, because you'll lose your momentum.
Right.
Okay. You know what I mean? So it's like you're saying, what I hear you saying is, okay, well, what if I'm processing like the fleeting notes, like the second pass or third pass, and then 3 days later I'm working on literature notes, first pass or second pass, and then a day later I do the permanent notes. And what I'm saying, no. It's a 15 to 45 minute window block where when you start on the permanent note of processing of a fleeting note that you captured and making that into a permanent note, that whole process is going to take anywhere between 15 to 45 minutes, and you're gonna get it done with distractions or whatever happens, but it's gonna get done to that completion. It's almost like doing your laundry, right? It's like, yeah, you don't have to take it from the washer and put it in the dryer immediately, right? You can be distracted, you can go to the kitchen, you can go to the restroom, right? But if you don't go back to the washer and take out your clothes and put it in the dryer, what's gonna happen? It's gonna get moldy and musty. And it's the same idea where it's like you have a momentum and you need clothes for the next day. That's a good analogy, by the way.
You know, I think one of my challenges might be that my notes tend to be more galactic than they are atomic.
Well, I'm looking at your work and it looks fantastic. I think you're there. I think you're abstraction.
Oh no, I'm talking about in my private work around the complexities of what I'm doing. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
and it'll come in tighter. It will.
Yeah.
As it comes together, and once you see the form and the structure of it too,
Yeah.
it'll come much tighter. But I'm looking at your work right now, Curtis, and it's phenomenal. You're doing all the abstractions.
I appreciate your contribution there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but I hope that analogy helps you understand a little bit more.
And as we iterate here, it'll come together, and my questions will even become more pinpointed.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Oh, I actually had another question for you. Is this kind of like you can't really understand the experience until you've gone through it, kind of like women don't really know the true experience of giving birth until they actually go through it, where you're talking about how you don't get distracted by all of these distractions outside because you have a system? Because it boggles my mind that that's something that's possible. And I've seen how you work, and I've seen how you can context switch so quickly. And I just wanted to, if you could elaborate more on that experience, because hearing about it, I'm like, my brain literally doesn't believe you.
Do you drive a car?
We do, but I don't know how to drive. I grew up in Shanghai, so I don't know how to drive.
How do you usually get to work before the lockdown?
I walk.
When you're walking, are you thinking about every left turn and right turn? You have like a path, right? You have like a route that you go where you throw on your headphones, and like you've been going to the same job for the past 6 months, and it's like you have this path, and sometimes you'll have a bus that'll get in the way. Sometimes you'll have to wait at the stoplight a little bit longer, but generally you have like a groove, right? And it's the same thing with as soon as you start on a permanent note, it's like capturing the fleeting note is one aspect, right? That's one step. Then processing that fleeting note all the way to a permanent note is, if you look at it, it's really just one step. All you're doing is walking to work. And so if say you're walking to work and then say you want to get a bagel, then you can go stop and get a bagel. That's like looking at your phone, but you're still going to go to work. So you're still going to finish. You're still going to bring it up to a permanent note, but you can deal with the distractions because you're present and you're not making the decisions. It's almost like what he's talking about in the beginning of this book. It's like you can only hold like 7 plus or minus 2 things in your head at a time. And if only one of those things is walking to work, then you can manage with the distraction of picking up a bagel, waiting as a bus goes by, and maybe taking a look at the map and going, shit, I'm a little late, let me take this way. You can deal with those distractions because you're not having to decide on where something lives anymore. It's almost like that single bucket that you capture everything in. It's like you know where it's going to live. You know where it goes. and some things might get in the way, but you know that this is your home base. And it's the same idea with, if you see this structure, you're like, oh, well, I don't need to decide where my notes go anymore, which is what's mind blowing. You don't need to know, like, how am I going to abstract this out? Oh, well, obviously I'm in my fleeting notes second pass. I know exactly where I am. And tomorrow's video is going to help that a lot too, because I'm literally walking through it. And the look on your face tells me that you don't believe it. And it's,
Well, I don't believe it, and also I'm just fascinated, and it's such a good analogy that you just made. So it's like just a lot of combination of stuff that's happening at once. But okay, I think I understand it. I will wait to see when it truly clicks, and I'll let you know when that happens.
Can I just clarify one point, Bo? So it's like I'm reading my book and I'm reading a chapter and I'm going through it, and I can't afford to stop and be doing like the fleeting notes to permanent notes with every single idea that catches my attention. So my strategy has been, usually it's by way of highlighting or just making a little mark of like, okay, this is potentially going to be a fleeting note. So I might go through a chapter and have like, let's say 4 ideas. And I'm going to write down those fleeting notes, and I write those 4 things down, and then I come back to it later in the day or the next day. And it's possible that 2 of those fleeting notes just don't go anywhere. They were interesting, but on further reflection, nothing really there. And the other 2 I'm going to take all the way to permanent note.
so what I hear you saying is, I would suggest not breaking that state of mind that you're in when you're in reading mode.
Okay.
Right? But if I could add one suggestion, it would be, well, 2 things. Be discerning on what you do consider fleeting notes.
Okay.
Like, look for the ones that you're thinking about, the notes that you've already written. It's a little bit hard because you don't have a critical mass of notes yet, but
Okay.
think about what you want to be thinking about and see if any of these actually can add upon what you've already written.
Okay.
And the second suggestion would be, highlighting is great, right? But if I could add one more piece of thing, it would be, what I've realized is when I'm reading and I don't want to break that flow state of reading, if I can do things that will add more gasoline to that reading state, it's always better, if that makes sense. So if it breaks me from that state, then that's not good. But if it adds more focus and intention and more excitement to read more, then that's a good thing. And what I've realized is that if I can take a proper fleeting note with that first pass, right? And I prefer like audio recording it, but you can simply have like a little notebook out and write it out, or have Roam open and just write it out. But just do that first pass where it's like, why is this resonating with me? Right? What is it about this passage especially that I just had all these ideas come off? And as soon as you write for about 2 minutes, what happens is you become even more excited to read more, if that makes sense. Because it wasn't something that was inhibiting your flow state, it was accelerating your flow state because you were able to write down why this book is so important right now.
You know, one thing that I just want to toss in something. One thing for me that I'm trying to really discipline myself to do is recognize the reality that everything I'm working for is for generative ideas that fit. And so often I'll have a generative idea that absolutely just so dovetail fits that I make the false assumption that I'm going to retain it. And often it floats away like a dream. And I'm grasping, trying to grab onto something that I unfortunately lost. I'd say some of the absolute best insights I've ever had, on average, I bet you I've lost undoubtedly more than I've retained. And so remembering that for me says, okay, whatever it took, whatever reading, whatever anything it took to get me to that moment, and I have that moment, I've got to stop and capture it lest I lose it forever.
Can I just say one thing? Is that there was a moment, I think it was probably around 60 or 75 notes. And I was having a conversation with my brother, and then all of a sudden, like, I got a flood of these ideas and thoughts, and it was like, it was a directly correlated to the notes that I've been capturing in this structure in Roam. And then it's like that sort of like dovetailed, like you said, into where I was at an intellect, and it was like then I actually had my notes in front of me, and then I was able to pull from that and search within those notes. It's that same feeling. If you can have that with in the cloud, that's not in our heads anymore. I hope that provides a little bit of hope into why this is so important to learn and master and practice in your life, is that now you don't have to grasp at these beautiful moments. You can actually see those beautiful moments.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah.
I've got just a quick technical question, Bo.
Yes.
On the, I'm still a little confused about the primacy of the timestamps, the way you do it, without any other text, just the time standing alone on a line. You have to click in to see what's underneath. So I'm wondering why? Because I timestamp things my as well, but I also put a little text to indicate.
It's really for this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's really for this. Can you see my shared screen?
I see. Yeah.
It's really it's in accordance with that, but it's also this idea of setting your intention to start something in order to end it.
Yeah.
And those little moments, what it is, it's almost like an attaboy or like a pat on your back. It's almost like, the dopaminergic reaction that happens when you set a goal and you see yourself making progress towards that. It's that same sort of idea, but it's that one small action that creating that timestamp does that snowballs into the creation of a permanent note that's added to your Zettelkasten, and then you can move on with your day. And this only takes 15 minutes to get that sort of, what do you call it? That sort of endorphin rush of like completion.
Yeah. Okay.
But, and to me, it's the simplicity of that as well. Because then if you go to the daily notes page, it's all hidden behind that one thing.
Right.
And that, to me, it's there's something beautiful about that aesthetically. But again, I mean, you're going to adapt and adopt to what's going to work best for you. I just feel like the benefit of having this sort of, I'm going to start right now and I'm going to complete something that does something to the soul of like, oh, I'm making progress on what I said I was going to make progress on.
And you're not interested, obviously, in duration, how long you worked on something.
I mean, you could easily just go in here and do another current timestamp in regards to that, but I mean, usually I'll have like the next meeting here, like,
yeah, okay,
meeting notes here or whatever that looks like.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
and for me, that's always spreading out over a multitude of sessions. And so that's where my earlier question kind of played in.
Yeah, looping back to Curtis's point real quick, I will admit, I'll confess to you, Bo, that when I first saw your system, I thought that just doesn't account for time in the way, because I was kind of really hung up on a similar point to Curtis, is like, man, as much stuff as I have to process, I can't possibly do that system and I can't do it in one setting. But once I sort of said, okay, I'm gonna believe it, try it a little bit, see if it works. Then I started analyzing the processes for each step a little differently. And I had two observations that may or may not apply, Curtis. One, I was kind of treating permanent notes like they were going to be engraved in marble. So I was like, I got to wait and see if I really want to do this or not. And I finally just said, look, I'm going to make a permanent note and it's not that big a deal. And if I come up with something that contradicts it, I'll make another one next to it and figure out why. But then the other end of it was where something else came up for me, is I realized, I don't remember where it is in Aaron's book, but he talks about one of the studies that talks about familiarity, and you think you know something if it feels familiar. And I started looking back on the fleeting notes thing and thinking about the workload. And I was like, I started looking at my highlights or marks or jots. And what I noticed is a lot of what I was highlighting was stuff that was familiar. I was excited because it felt like something I already knew. And I was like, well, I don't need to process this stuff. It's just a little little hit in my brain of how excited I am that I've read something like this before. So I realized that what I actually need to take from a fleeting note to a permanent note was actually a lot less stuff than I thought, because my old system was just, hey, I was just reading and feeling good. This looks familiar, this looks familiar, this looks familiar. And then I thought I was going to have to process all that. I didn't really need to. I don't know if that changes anything in your dynamic, Curtis, but that's kind of what popped into my brain.
That was beautiful. That was so beautifully put, Roy. I mean, I love that. I love every bit of it. I'm just so grateful that that's being recorded, and that when people listen back to this, like, that's gonna solve so many of the things that
I also wonder if as we continue seeing that the system works more and more, it becomes like a positive feedback loop where it's almost like you want to invest the time, you want to invest the energy. Because like even just noticing now that I'm finally caught up with the homework, I already noticed my frequency of my daily habits increasing. Like the number of times that I'm going through and actually trying to process a fleeting note, trying to create a literature note, that I think I literally asked you yesterday, but it was like, how do I make time for this? And I find myself unconsciously making more time. So I feel like as the system works more, we're going to want to dedicate that time, and it almost be like a natural thing versus the resistance that we might feel in the beginning.
Something I was wondering, Bo, if it eventually be like walking, like when you think of an infant and then moving all the way to the walking stage, like how you're always moving towards that. And then there's like, you got the mom and the dad cheering you on. So there's Bo. Yeah, you guys can do it. You let us fall and stumble and then get a few black eyes, maybe. You're the kind of parent that would let a baby get a black eye.
I would definitely, exactly.
To learn their lesson. but then once you start to walk, it's difficult, like if you watch a little infant just starting out, but after not that long, they just go with thinking. And then like now, like none of us think about walking, and we get stopped constantly. We start chatting with somebody and then we turn around and start walking, and we don't think 2 seconds about putting one foot in the other, or what's in the way, or what we have to do to walk. So like, is it like that? Eventually it's just basically like walking. It's just muscle memory that we just don't think about. We just automatically do it.
Yeah. I think you hit the nail on the head. Hey, what do you think?
Well, that's what I kind of came up with this week. I was just kind of like, of course, I'm a parent, so I get these little parent analogies. But I was like, maybe it's kind of like teaching walking, or like watching a child walk, and then, you just don't think about it later.
Here's a question. Don't you think that's what building a Zettelkasten is?
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, that's when we were going through this week. That was kind of my little epiphany this week. I'm like, it's like teaching a child to walk, and then eventually just don't think about it anymore.
And it's almost like with the threads of conversation. I mean, even with like, as you build these notes out, it's like once you go through those notes, and then it's like it's in your brain and it's in your, it, like with what Curtis and what they're talking about, it's like, no, then you don't, you see something that springs out to you. It's like, oh, I already have that in my Zettelkasten. It's like, I already know what a park bench is. Now I kind of want to go explore a little bit further out from there.
Yeah, what's fun today is because you said, well, you could choose something of your own choosing. Well, I read the Culture Map book a while ago, and there were some pieces in it that I really wanted to just unpack a little more. So I pulled the book out and just thumbed for where most of my handwritten notes were. And I just grabbed one paragraph that I had written a bunch. I'm like, hey, this is a really good excuse to like go back to something that piqued my interest. So.
Yes. Okay.
And I guess once you start going through, if you're doing academic work and you're going through journal papers and you're starting to build up this knowledge repository, you can really become a lot more almost kind of selective or strategic in your reading, where you might come across a paper and go, I've already got all this. I'll pick out one thing. So you can zoom through a paper fairly quick and go, there's one thing here that's interesting, but the rest of this, I've already got this in my Zettelkasten.
It's discernment.
Yeah, that's something I was thinking about, Michael, this week, like after we talked, that I'm starting to be more careful about when I'm spending my time reading before I just consume knowledge like there was no tomorrow, like just constant. And now I'm like, I'm not going to fill my brain with that up, because I honestly don't want to spend that much time thinking about it. Like, is this something I really want to think about? So I don't know if I have a love-hate relationship with that spot in my life right now. So we'll see where that goes in a little while.
This is like all of my dreams like come into life right now. Just listen to all of you talk. Just like, oh, the addiction to consumption has been confronted and slayed. You know, it's like,
Okay, let's keep reading.
can I say
Yeah.
one last thing?
Okay,
You know, I don't. So Connor, the CEO of Rome, he's watching us. You know, and he wanted to jump in yesterday or last week's Rome reading room, by the way, just so everyone knows. And he's keeping tabs on our progress, and I think it's a very good thing. It's a good sign because if this becomes a staple, you can send people that you love and are dear to you here, and they're gonna learn how to start doing what we're learning right now to slay this dragon of consumption. So, just want to throw a little pressure on there for everyone. I don't know where we are.
I think Ina was about to do all this enables. Were you going to finish the page, Ina?
No. I think I finished that I feel like that was like a concluding kind of summary. So the first step is to break down. I think if you wanted to start there, Michael, go ahead, please.
Oh,
feel free.
okay. All right. The first step is to break. Sorry?
Here?
The first step.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I going?
Go.
The first step is to break down the amorphous task of writing into smaller pieces of different tasks that can be finished in one go. The second step is to make sure we always write down the outcome of our thinking, including possible connections to further inquiries. As the outcome of each task is written down and possible connections become visible, it is easy to pick up the work anytime where we left it without having to keep it in mind all the time. Possible subsequent tasks are open questions or connections to other notes, which we could elaborate on further or not. It also comes up in explicit reminders like review this chapter and check for redundancies, which belong in the project folder. Or the third option is a simple fact that something is still in our inbox waiting to be turned into a permanent note, a quick and not yet crossed out note in our notebook, or literature notes not yet archived in our reference system. All of this enables us to later pick up a task exactly where we stop without the need to keep in mind that there still was something to do. That is one of the main advantages of thinking and writing. Everything is externalized anyway. Conversely, we can use the Zeigarnik effect to our advantage by deliberately keeping unanswered questions in our mind. We can ruminate about them even when we do something that has nothing to do with work and ideally does not require our full attention. Letting thoughts linger without focusing on them gives our brains the opportunity to deal with problems in a different, often surprisingly productive way. While we have a walk or a shower or clean the house, the brain cannot help but play around with the last unsolved problem it came across. And that is why we so often find the answer to a question in rather casual situations. By taking into account these little insights into how our brains work, we can make sure that we will not get distracted by thoughts of what we need from the supermarket when we sit at the desk. Rather, we may solve a crucial problem while we run errands. How true. Or you read something complicated and then you go to bed, and oftentimes you wake up in the morning and your brain is still kind of chunking through it while you're sleeping, and it's very powerful stuff. Who's next? Want me
Yeah,
to
I think
go?
that's me.
Yeah, go for it, Chris.
Okay. No, actually, it's Beverly. Beverly here? We may. There she is. Yep, go ahead.
Chapter 9.6, reduce the number of decisions. Next to the attention that can only be directed at one thing at a time and the short-term memory that can only hold up to 7 things at once, the third limited resource is motivation or willpower. Here too, the environmental design of our workflow makes all the difference. It shouldn't come as a surprise anymore that a close cooperation with the slip blocks turns out to be far superior to any sophisticated planning. For the longest time, willpower was seen more as a character trait than a resource. This has changed. Today, willpower is compared to muscles, a limited resource that depletes quickly and needs time to recover. Improvement through training is possible to a certain degree, but takes time and effort. The phenomenon is usually discussed under the term ego depletion. We use the term ego depletion to refer to a temporary reduction in the self's capacity or willingness to engage in volitional action, including controlling the environment, controlling the self, making choices, and initiating action caused by prior exercise of volition. One of the most interesting findings of the research on ego depletion is the broad variety of things that can have a depleting effect. Our results suggest that a broad assortment of actions make use of the same resource. Acts of self-control, responsible decision-making, and active choice seem to interfere with other acts that follow soon after. The implication is that some vital resource of the self becomes depleted by such acts of volition. To be sure, we assume that this resource is commonly replenished, although the factors that may hasten or delay the replenishment remain unknown, along with the precise nature of this resource. Even something seemingly unrelated, like being the victim of prejudices, can have a significant effect, as controlling the influence of stereotypes may rely on the same limited strength resource on which people draw for self-regulation. The smartest way to deal with this kind of limitation is to cheat. Instead of forcing ourselves to do something we don't feel like doing, we need to find a way to make us feel like doing what moves our project further along. Doing the work that needs to be done without having to apply too much willpower requires a technique, a rouge. Even though results of these studies are currently under intense scrutiny and have to be taken with a grain of salt, it is safe to argue that a reliable and standardized working environment is less taxing on our attention, concentration, and willpower, or if you like, ego. It is well known that decision-making is one of the most tiring and wearying tasks, which is why people like Barack Obama or Bill Gates only wear two suit colors, dark blue or dark gray. This means they have one less decision to make in the morning, leaving more resources for the decisions that really matter. In the way we organize our research and writing, we too can significantly reduce the amount of decisions we have to make. While content-related decisions have to be made on what is more and what is less important in an article, the connections between notes, the structure of a text, etc., most organizational decisions can be made up front, once and for all, by deciding on one system. By always using the same notebook for making quick notes, always extracting the main ideas from a text in the same way, and always turning them into the same kind of permanent notes, which are always dealt with in the same manner, the number of decisions during a work session can be greatly reduced. That leaves us with much more mental energy that we can direct toward more useful tasks, like trying to solve the problems in question. Being able to finish a task in a timely manner and to pick up the work exactly where we left it has another enjoyable advantage that helps to restore our attention. We can have breaks without fear of losing the thread. Breaks are much more than just opportunities to recover. They are crucial for learning. They allow the brain to process information, move it into long-term memory, and prepare it for new information. If we don't give ourselves a break in between work sessions, be it out of eagerness or fear of forgetting what we were doing, it can have a detrimental effect on our efforts. To have a walk or even a nap supports learning and thinking.
Hey, Bo, can I ask one question? And this is just a quick kind of mechanical thing. Can you just go back for 1 second to that last chapter? So as I'm going through, and let's say that this last paragraph, let's say that Doyle and Zach Rycek, let's say that point was interesting to me. So I make a fleeting note based on that idea, and I pull that quote into the my literature note, or sorry, my reference note. Oftentimes when we're doing research, we were encouraged to go right to the bottom level. So it could be that Doyle actually quoted, or this guy who wrote this paper, Ahrens, quoted from this. And so we would be looking to go to the Doyle thing. So would I make a sub kind of a link within the reference thing to say, okay, Ahrens said this, but Doyle and Zachary said that? Like, I don't want to belabor this point because this is like only if you're doing PhD stuff do you really care, but I'm just kind of curious.
There's a guy, I'm blanking on who it is on Twitter, who's very active in Rome Cult, who kind of created a little system for that. So he basically tags a quote. He'll use a quote to show there's a quote, and then he'll do source. And so the way he would do it, he'd do source Ahrens 2017, citing Doyle and Zach.
Okay.
And it's all compact, but he does that as a shift enter. So it's all part of that, so that if he ever pulls it in, it's not a separate block that you lose that sourcing. It all travels together.
Cool. Thanks, Roy. Because that's something that you're supposed to go to your primary sources and stuff. So, okay, question answered. Thank you.
Well, that's an interesting point, though. I kind of want to, because so what you're saying is that if this paragraph stood out to you, right?
Yeah.
Hypothetically, but you have to go down to the most bottom level source, right?
Yeah, that's right. Doyle would be the primary source. But let's say I go to Doyle. I mean, this can become a hellacious thing sometimes when you're reading stuff, because you could be 5 levels before you get to the primary thing. And the primary thing was from some dude in the 40s who wrote a book, or a woman who wrote a book in the 40s, and that people have been stacking. But kind of part of the whole academic rigor is you're supposed to be kind of questioning stuff. That's why you can't just read Wikipedia. It's not authoritative. Doyle could be the authoritative piece on long-term memory, blah, blah, blah. Maybe he's a you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's why academic writing is friggin' exhausting and time consuming, because you want to be authoritative, especially if you're doing your dissertation or your thesis. You gotta be like authoritative. You gotta be like right to the people who did the original research.
So
here's hairs, I know, but this is one of the beauties of what I'm seeing with Rome is like to what Roy said. You just need to have some little, macros or some little keystroke things, but it's like there's nothing you can't do. And you're going to show me right here. Yeah, there you go.
You can post them all inside this child block, couldn't you? Like you could have another child block here, Doyle.
Yeah.
Doyle link.
Yeah.
Right. And then another layer deeper.
Yeah.
Right.
This is really powerful. This is very, very, very powerful for writing, like for doing research and writing like this, being able to do this easily, but have it in a way that you could interlink it and see, because you're going to wind up reading hundreds and hundreds of papers and stuff especially if you're a full-time like scholar, researcher, whatever, you're going to see Doyle all the time. Like, because Doyle, wrote the canonical book on mental mapping of what, I'm just making all this up, by the way, but Doyle wrote the canonical book on this, which is like the authoritative thing. And it turns out he's actually quoted in like 52 different papers or whatever. Like this is really powerful stuff. So thank you. This is sleep deprivation. This is sleep deprivation right now. So I'm sorry. I'm strung out on chocolate.
This is really cool though, because I kind of want to just walk you through. If I was going to have a manuscript, right, I would bring over the permanent note just by copying over that text, but then I can go in here and my computer's going to shut down. But
yes,
I could just basically go in there and then drag over all that information too, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And but because it's all like I could drag this over as well, but because it's because it's sort of there already in like in the block, I don't need to sort of, you know, go to another place to find this information. It's
Yep, that's
all
right.
within my scope. I'm gonna stop sharing real quick.
Michael, Bo, I had one follow-up question actually for you too. Was like, I don't know if you saw in the chat from yesterday's live session. I think his name was Chris, where he was asking about the how to manage having multiple references when you're writing an academic paper, and how to make sure that you're not plagiarizing potentially that. Is that a same problem that you were kind of trying, like, seeing how Rome could solve it? Got
It's
it.
always your biggest fear is always accidentally plagiarizing. And yes, you can use, like, you know, Grammarly to reverse read your paper and make sure. There's all kinds of programs that you can use to make sure that you're not plagiarizing, but better that you just don't right from the very beginning. And it's through the power of this of the note taking, having the links, and then as you're building that fleeting note, literature note, permanent note, all of that's in your own words. The beauty of this is that, you know, and I'm sure Bo's gonna get to this, but the beauty of the permanent notes is that you don't have to go and ask for permission, and you don't have to quote anybody, because those are all your own words. You don't have to worry about plagiarizing, and you got your citations all right there. Like, it's easy. It makes writing. This is why Lumens was super productive. It's a ton of work at the bottom level. Like, this fleeting notes to permanent note is a ton of work, but once you put in the work in that, I'm not saying the papers write themselves, but this stuff becomes way easier, I think. That's why it's so powerful.
You've got receipts the whole way.
You got receipts the whole way. Exactly right.
And Roy touched upon Joel Chan, by the way. I respect Joel Chan so much. His workflow is going to be different. It's going to be much more academic. He is a professor, but his workflow is phenomenal. I love the work that he does. And I mean, he is more of a duplication of the analog Slipbox in the digital realm, but he has a functioning Slipbox. It works for him. He's able to teach it to other people. I respect him a lot. He's one of the people that actually does the work. So just wanted to big up him.
I have a question for Roy and Michael. As far as citations, do you keep properly formatted citations according to your style manual in Rome, or do you have a dedicated, citation manager?
Yeah. So really quickly, this is like low tech, and you're gonna make fun of me. So just in advance, like, screw you guys, I don't need you. But this is what I do. I use Zotero. So out of Zotero, I have all of my shit in Zotero, right? I got plugins in Chrome, so it's a piece of cake. I go into my Moodle or into library at my university, I download stuff, it's in Zotero. Okay, now I'm gonna write about it. So I just do export bibliography and into memory, and we use Harvard Bath, University of Bath, Harvard style, but you can have whatever style. Yeah. And then I go into, and I've created, so I've actually been building a whole thing in my own personal graph. And I've created a reference page, and I put it in there. And then within Rome, I can cite it really easily, because the citation key and the screwing around, and I was looking online, and I didn't want to fuck up my database and whatever with code. So I thought, you know what, screw it. I'm just gonna export out the thing. So, like, you know, Doyle and Zacharick 2013, that's how it shows up. And then I've got a reference page where I got the title of the paper and stuff. I've got a few things in there, but the biggest thing is I got my citation. So it works. It's like, I don't know. I'm sure there's probably a really elegant way, but
yeah. How about you, Roy?
I haven't cited anything since law school 25 years ago. I work in politics. I never have to attribute anything to anybody.
Yeah.
But I just happened to see something about how people were doing it. I actually use this very simplistic source and citing if I think I want to go back and find that idea, but not because I'm ever going to publish it in a paper.
Okay.
And
I work in higher ed, so I'm expected to always be showing my work. And we use bibliographies in almost every presentation we do, because it's sort of what we do for a living, and we kind of have to eat the dog food. So,
right.
If I'm doing something super crude and fast, I'll just draw the line at the bottom of the page and then put my references at the bottom, and then asterisk, like do a reference block with an asterisk if I really need to. So if it's like a short piece of work.
You do that in Rome?
Yeah, so you can do like that the triple hyphen, and then you'll get a line, and then I just put my references underneath it so they're not up in my work. And then you can if you want, you can reference block it with an alias so that you can put it sort of just like you would like a one in Word or something like that. I mean, it's kind of a crude way of doing it, but it works super fast. I don't have to put any fancy system in to make it work.
It's just the one thing that, you know, for anybody who's like doing this for scholarly work is just invest the time up front in whatever system you're going to do. So it's simpler, the better, right? But the danger is don't start cutting and pasting and copying stuff in, and then 6 months later, you got all this beautiful stuff with no citations, and then you're screwed, because then you're like, shit, where did I get this from? And then you can run into serious trouble with plagiarism. So that's why it's kind of OCD, but if you just invest a little bit of time, you save a boatload of time at the end when you're getting your manuscript all put together. So food for thought.
That's true, Michael, unless you're David Shields.
I don't know. David.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I'm talking about some of these guys that, you know, that just appropriate left and right, and it's all like a mixtape for them, you know. They don't care. Like Shields published a book called Reality Hunger, and he didn't want to include any references. And as I'm reading the book, I'm recognizing author after author, and there's no accreditation whatsoever.
Yeah.
So the publisher said you have to put in references in the back. So he, asshole that he is, made the print so small that if you wanted to follow up on a reference because you were intrigued by a quote, you'd have to, you know, take it to a printer and have them enlarge the.
Stealing. Like, it's just called for what it is stealing. Like you're misrepresenting yourself by saying, oh, I came up with this idea that actually was Zoil and Zachris from 2013, and you're stealing. And I mean, if you're okay with stealing, then steal your boots. But we're trying to, by doing this whole thing, we're trying to be. Anyway, I'm sorry. Sorry, Bo. I apologize. I'm done.
Who's up?
I think I'm up. What's the protocol, by the way? How do you guys determine how much you read? Is it just kind of arbitrary?
It's arbitrary.
Okay, here we go.
You want rules? I mean, I don't really like.
Oh no, I
rules.
just wanted to see if there was a protocol. I wasn't privy to. I would advise you read with a pen in your hand and enter in a little book short hints of what you feel that is common or that may be useful. For this will be the best method for imprinting such porculus in your memory. Benjamin Franklin. Read with pen in hand. To get a good paper written, you only have to rewrite a good draft. To get a good draft written, you only have to turn a series of notes into a continuous text. As a series of notes is just the rearrangement of notes you already have in your slip box. All you really have to do is have a pen in your hand when you read. If you understand what you read and translate it into the different context of your own thinking, materialized in the slip box, you cannot help but transform the findings and thoughts of others into something that is new and your own. It works both ways. The series of notes in the slip box develops into arguments, which are shaped by the theories, ideas, and mental models you have in your head. And the theories, ideas, and mental models in your head are also shaped by the things you read. They are constantly changing and challenged by the surprising connections with which the slip box confronts you. The richer the slip box becomes, the richer your own thinking becomes. The slip box is an idea generator that develops in lockstep with your own intellectual development. Together, you can turn previously separated or even isolated facts into a critical mass of interconnected ideas. The step from the slip box to the final text is pretty straightforward. The content is already meaningful, thought through, and in many parts already put into well-connected sequences. The notes only need to be put into a linear order. While the notes themselves are formulated so that they can be understood on their own, they are at the same time embedded in one or more contexts that enrich their meaning. Drawing from the slip box to develop a draft is more like a dialogue with it than a mechanical act. Therefore, the outcome is never a copy of previous work, but always comes with surprises. There will always be something you couldn't have anticipated. Obviously, the same applies to every single step before. The outcome of reading with a pen in hand is not possible to anticipate either. And here too, the idea is not to copy, but to have a meaningful dialogue with the texts we read. I'll stop there.
That was awesome. Who did that? That was awesome. I want sound effects.
Oh, that just happened to synchronize with a focus mate session ending.
You're kidding.
It just was perfectly synchronized. That's why I stopped there.
That's magical.
It's Jungian synchronicity.
I'm all about it, baby. Eric, I see you. We're gonna have Chris go first, and then we'll jump into. Oh, there you go. You're in it. Never mind. I see you. Awesome. You got it. Chris.
Okay. Yep. When we extract ideas from the specific context of a text, we deal with ideas that serve a specific purpose in a particular context, support a specific argument, are part of a theory that isn't ours, or written in a language we wouldn't use. This is why when we have to translate them into our own language to prepare them to be embedded into new contexts of our own thinking, the different contexts within the slip box. Translating means to give the truest possible account of the original work using different words. It does not mean the freedom to make something fit. As well, the mere copying of quotes almost always changes their meaning by stripping them out of context, even though the words aren't changed. This is a common beginner mistake, which can only lead to a patchwork of ideas, but never a coherent thought.
Oh, sorry, I have a quick question. Can we elaborate more on this quotes thing? Why? I don't understand. The last two sentences, as well, the mere copying of quotes almost always changes their meaning. Why?
I think he's saying, you know, sometimes if you're copying a quote out of a book, maybe it's a particular line or two, but you're not getting the full paragraph above it and the full meaning that led to that quote or those sentences, you're maybe not getting the full context of it. And it can be misinterpreted.
What are you thinking?
I don't know. Maybe it's a system that I need to unlearn for myself, but I like extracting quotes. I can't explain why yet. But like they've been helpful for me, even though I do see that I miss context with them. But yeah, I don't really know where I'm going with this. I
don't think you need to stop necessarily. Just as long as every time you find a quote that you have it as a child block underneath reference notes, and then you abstract on why that resonated with you. And I have a feeling what's going to happen is that you're going to be like, why the hell am I highlighting so much? Why am I taking so many quotes?
Yes.
I already know this. Or
That's literally my problem, or not, I don't know my problem, but like my reading current system is inefficient is because I'm scared of like what Chris is saying of like losing the context. I will literally highlight the entire paragraph and know that there's that one line that like I want to remember, but then it's just basically like I'm rereading the book in highlighted chunks.
So if you highlighted it, in particular one line, why did you highlight it? You highlighted it for a reason. And maybe because it's good. Maybe because it reminds you of something. You want to remember it for some reason. You want to do something with it later. What do you want to do? Why do you want to find this later? So I think it'd be fine to copy maybe a line or two or quote, but you're building on it, right? You're quoting that to saying, this makes me think of this, or this, it build on the idea.
I think to build on what Chris is saying, I agree, but I would almost challenge you to don't even extract the quote out, but to actually look at this whole paragraph and write your idea about it or your interpretation, synthesize it, or put it in your own words, and you don't need to take the quote out. That's actually the ultimate writing, is when you don't have any direct quotes in your paper. Now you might quote Drake or whoever and say, this general idea came from a couple people, but just take your interpretation of that paragraph.
Mike, I feel like you're asking me to be like a diabetic in a candy store. That's really hard.
Well,
Okay.
I like to go with this in a different way, because like sometimes when you come across a really well-spoken or well-expressed thought, it's like art. So for me, like to like look at the quote, I just appreciate the way they put the words together that just resonate or just do something in me. So like, I think that that's okay in my mind. And this is intervention, Bo, you're so funny. So
Samantha's getting it. This is like, you're an artist.
Yeah.
Give yourself the license. You have the license to
Yeah.
be an artist and interpret that. Samantha's bang on.
So like what I do sometimes, like if I do highlight a whole paragraph, I'm brutal with my books though. I take a pen, whether I have a ruler or not, and I underline just the one sentence that just really bang on, because it is art. If someone does a freaking awesome job of putting a sentence or a thing together, like just appreciate it and save it. Like if I did a really nice piece of photography and someone puts it on their wall, dang, that's like a real honor to me that they didn't go make their own picture that looks similar. They wanted my photo on their wall. So that's basically what you're doing. You're just taking a snapshot of something beautiful they put together. That's okay.
In
I like
coordination,
that. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
in coordination with what you just said there, I like to sometimes, even though I might have a way of saying it that I might like just as well, but I like to have sprinkled other people saying a collaborative thing that will break up the train of it being just me as well. And that's a whole nother reason to kind of bring in thoughts that don't necessarily have to be at an artful level even, but can just be a means of breaking the monotony of single voice.
So building on what what Curtis is saying, absolutely. But Yina, if you take what Curtis is saying as a rough mathematical ratio, 1 out of 10 times you put in the direct words, because there's something that really works, and it's a beautifully written passage, and you're right, it breaks up the thing. But depending on the kind of paper you're writing, of course, or the purpose of your writing, but your interpretation is the ultimate thing, and it is super hard. It's very time consuming, and you got to be confident in yourself that, oh, I'm getting it, and I'm synthesizing it, and I'm putting it back out there with a quote with Drake 2013, but not with like page 6 or whatever, or here's a direct quote. It's an evolutionary type of process.
All right, thank you so much, guys. I think that just knowing that I have the permission to still take in, I think like it's kind of like what Samantha's saying. I do like when someone just writes something so clearly, like beautifully, like even if it is factual and I could reinterpret in my own words, like that art is an art form. I think I do like preserving that, but also recognize that I should do that. It's almost like less is more. So thank you so much, guys. Appreciate
Now,
it.
I have a quick question relating to this while we're on this subject. Like with literature notes and such, I'll like take like using like Instapaper and Readwise and the different ways that Readwise will synchronize various sources together. Like I'll take those and bring in highlights and then use that as the base in which to write literature notes. Kind of like if I might be reading over here and not necessarily taking notes, capturing key thoughts, importing that in. And of course it shows up automatic with highlights and auto reference notes, and then using that as kind of like the beginning kickstarting of the process. I don't know what you guys' comments are on that, but that's one of my like little processes.
That's definitely weeks. I think that's the best part about all of this, is that what Michael is going to use, what Samantha's going to use, what I'm going to use, what every single one of us is going to use is going to be completely idiosyncratic to what we need from it. And it's like,
Bo, you have to read the chat box there. Michael wrote, because people who are listening to this online aren't going to hear this. So Michael wrote in the sidebar, not that you need it, but you're getting our permission to use your artistic intuition and putting your ideas down on paper. And then he cites it like an academic paper and puts Barr, Postman, Abbott, 2021.
Oh, I'm sorry, and Oakley. I'm sorry.
That's hilarious.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Hey, you got to put Oakley in there. Like you got to deep dive and get the proper references.
Oh, you'll be hearing from my attorneys on
I
that.
apologize. I apologize.
You'll be hearing
So what-
from, oh my gosh.
Well, one other thing I want to touch on, Yina, what you were saying is, when I'm starting to look at what I'm highlighting and I over highlight and I have Pocket and I'll mark things in Pocket and tag it and like, oh, I'm going to come back to this later. I'm starting to make notes. It's like, why, right? I really have to get more selective, because if I'm going to start making the notes and reading these things, doing something with it, I need to become selective, right? If you're doing academic writing, sure, you're going to use it to produce a piece of work. But for me, right, I know you do some writing, I'm starting to do some writing, but it's like, what are you going to do with it? Right, if I'm going to highlight, if I'm going to take notes, if I'm going to move in, I should have some intention of doing it later. Maybe it could be a few years down the line, right? But don't highlight just to highlight. Just do it if it truly strikes a chord with you.
You know what,
Okay.
I was struggling with this too about the quotes, and I just now gave myself permission that when I'm done this course, I'm going to follow all of Bo's rules, and then I'm going to create probably my own little spot there that's going to say quotes, because I'm like you, there's certain ones where I'm like, there's a quote in certain books where you're just like, there's like 3 bang on quotes in that book, and I don't want to lose them. So I think we just add another line in there for those.
You know what you can do? You can create a project Zettelkasten, follows the exact same structure. All it is quotes. And then you can actually connect quotes with different branched quotes. And then you can start seeing how these quotes are related. And that's all it has to be. As long as it's firewall from the Zettelkasten, you can have a project Zettelkasten with anything.
Yeah,
That's a great idea. I like that.
To me, it's about whether you love the quote because it's on point on content, or whether you just love it because of its style. And I dropped in, I have something that I tag as turn of phrase. If I just love the language, I don't care what it's about. I want to be able to, because I can totally steal that grammatical structure in another context. And sometimes I just want to scroll through beautiful sentences to see how it's been done. That's a separate problem, I think, than, you're quoting it for its content. And then I think that the thing that's super helpful to me is this whole idea of, why'd this person say it to, what'd they say it in reaction to, what's it say? So that Alan really, I thought, was elegant yesterday when everything was just this constant conversation. Sometimes it was 2 halves of Alan's brain, sometimes it was Alan and the author. And I just think that's a really interesting construct. Just see why you're using the quote,
Yeah. Okay. I got yeah. So sorry for taking up so much time, guys. This is great. I really appreciate this. Yeah.
I just had a quick comment. I used to be a chronic over highlighter. I would hit like the Kindle limits. Like, I think it's like 20% is terrible, and I couldn't export my notes. And I realized that I was kind of fooling myself into thinking I was taking notes when I wasn't actually elaborating on the notes. And they weren't really that useful because I was just overwhelmed with all these quotes. I was just, diluting my Zettelkasten. And so I had to learn to be much more selective about highlights. And I agree with a lot of what people here have said.
Do you feel supported? Huh? We all surrounded you and did an intervention on you.
I do. I feel a big hug. That was great. Big virtual hug. Thank you, everyone.
it's what people used to keep, what they called commonplace books. Before computers, they'd have a notebook and they'd write down passages out of books that they wanted to save. And like Roy and like I do, maybe it's just for the style, the beauty of the syntax, the sentential structure. Maybe it's because of the idea. And that, you comment maybe in response to the quotes, or you collect them because they speak to you. Have any of you guys heard of Manfred Kuhn? He was a blogger. I think he's probably retired by now, but he was a Lumen fanboy, and he was kind of an advocate at the time of an app called Connected Text. But he has a piece on, it's probably still up on the internet, called Some Idiosyncratic reflections on note-taking in general and connected text in particular. You can ignore anything he has to say about the app itself, but he says things like, I do believe that you cannot have sustained thought about anything difficult or complex without writing. He said, I try whenever possible not to collect raw quotes or information simply copied from the internet or from books, but to write excerpts or summaries in my own words on the basis of my reading. Luhmann called this reformulating writing. And he goes, reading should never be merely passive and consist in the mere absorption or copying of information. It should be critical and engage the material reflectively, being guided by questions such as, why is this important? How does it fit in? Is it true? And so on. It's a good piece that plays into everything we're talking about.
You put a link of that into the chat, Rick, and we'll.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rick.
Okay. I think we've wrung every last little note out of this. So no, it's a great discussion. All right.
That's a good one, Chris.
Okay, moving on. While the literature notes will be stored in the reference system together with the bibliographic details, separate from the slip box, but still close to the context of the original text, they're already written with an eye towards the lines of thought within the slip box. Everything you were talking about, Michael. Luhmann describes this step as follows. I always have a slip of paper at hand on which I write down the ideas of certain pages. On the backside, I write down the bibliographic details. After finishing the book, I go through my notes and think how these notes might be relevant for already written notes in the slip box. It means that I always read with an eye toward the possible connections in the slip box. How extensive the literature notes should be really depends on the text and what we need it for. It also depends on our ability to be concise, the complexity of the text, and how difficult it is to understand. As literature notes are also a tool for understanding and grasping the text, more elaborate notes make sense in more challenging cases, while in easier cases, it might be sufficient to just jot down some keywords. Luhmann, certainly being on the outer spectrum of expertise, contented himself with pretty short notes and was still able to turn them into valuable slipbox notes without distorting the meaning of the original text. It is mainly a matter of having an extensive lattice work of mental models or theories in our heads that enable us to identify and describe the main ideas quickly. Whenever we explore a new unfamiliar subject, our notes will tend to be more extensive, but we shouldn't get nervous about it, as this is the deliberate practice of understanding we cannot skip. Sometimes it is necessary to slowly work our way through a difficult text, and sometimes it is enough to reduce a whole book to a single sentence. The only thing that matters is that these notes provide the best possible support for the next step, the writing of the actual slipbox notes. What is most helpful is to reflect on the frame, the theoretical background, methodological approach, or perspective of the text we read. That often means to reflect as much on what is not mentioned as what is mentioned. And Michael, I think that touches on a point you made, is where you'll be reading something and you're like, I've got this already. No need to dig deep. Maybe take a few words, but the more notes you have, the more nodes you have, the more familiar you are with your own slip box, the more connections you can make. Okay, I'll stop there.
I guess I'll read the next part. Taking literature notes this way is very different from the way literature notes are taken by most students, which is either not systemic enough or overly systemic. Most often, it's just systemic in the wrong way. By employing often recommended reading techniques like SQ3R or SQ4R, they treat every text the same, regardless of the content. They do not clearly decide on the format and the organization of their notes, and do not have a plan for what to do with them afterwards. Without a clear purpose for the notes, taking them will feel more like a chore than the actual step with a bigger project, within a bigger project. Sometimes long excerpts are written with good intentions, but that is not sustainable. Sometimes the only thing that is done is underlining sentences and making some comments in the margins of a book, which is almost like taking no notes at all. And more often than not, reading is not accompanied by taking notes, which is, in terms of writing, almost as valuable as not having read at all. Here, everything is about building up a critical mass of useful notes in the slip box, which gives us a clear idea of how to read and how to take literature notes. While the purpose of taking literature notes is as clear as the procedure, you are free to use whatever technique helps with the most with understanding what you are reading and getting to useful notes. Even if you use 10 different colors for underlining and a SQ8R reading technique, but all of this would be just an extra step before you do the only step that really counts, which is to take the permanent note that will add value to the actual slip box. You need to take some form of literature notes that capture your understanding of text. So you have something in front of your eyes while you're making the slip box note, but don't turn it into a project itself. Literature notes are short and meant to help with writing slip box notes. Everything else either helps to get to this point or is a distraction. You can type a literature note directly into Zotero, where it will be stored with the bibliographic details. You might want to write them by hand though. Different independent studies indicate that writing by hand facilitates understanding. In a small but fascinating study, 2 psychologists tried to find out if it made a difference if students in a lecture took notes by hand or by typing them into their laptops. Mueller and Oppenheimer, 2014. They were not able to find any difference in terms of the number of facts the students were able to remember, but in terms of understanding the content of the lecture, the students who took their notes by hand came out much, much better. After a week, this difference in understanding was still clearly measurable. There is no secret to it, and the explanation is pretty simple. Handwriting is slower and can't be corrected as quickly as electronic notes. Because students can't write fast enough to keep up with everything that is said in a lecture, they are forced to focus on the gist of what is being said, not the details. But being able to note down the gist of a lecture, you have to understand it in the first place. So if you're writing by hand, you are forced to think about what you hear or read. Otherwise, you won't be able to grasp the underlying principle, the idea, the structure of an argument. Handwriting makes pure copying impossible, but instead facilitates the translation of what is said or written into one's own words. The student who typed into their laptops were much quicker, which enabled them to copy the lecture more closely but circumvented actual understanding. They focused on completeness. Verbatim notes can be taken with almost no thinking, as if words are taken a shortcut from the ear to the hand, bypassing the brain. If you decide to write your notes by hand, keep them in one place and sort them alphabetically in the usual way, surname, year. Then you can easily match them with the bibliographic details in your reference system. But whether you write them by hand or not, keep in mind that this is all about the essence, the understanding and preparation for the next step, the transferring of ideas into the context of your own lines of thought in the slip box. Guess I'll stop right there. I'll go to the
Colby.
Samantha?
Colby. No?
Samantha?
Samantha?
I'd like to
me to
take a
read?
room vote that Bo reads for us for a while.
I'd love to read.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Love to read.
By the way, first, I just want to interrupt this program to say hi to Annette because she couldn't be here today. So I'm assuming that she's going to listen to this later. So,
Hi, Annette. Hi, Nettie.
all right.
All right. Chapter 10.2, keep an open mind. While selectivity is the key to smart note-taking, it is equally important to be selective in a smart way. Unfortunately, our brains are not very smart in selecting information by default. While we should seek out disconfirming arguments and facts that challenge our way of thinking, we're naturally drawn to everything that makes us feel good, which is everything that confirms what we already believe we know. The very moment we decide on a hypothesis, our brains automatically go into a search mode, scanning our surroundings for supporting data, which is neither a good way to learn nor research. Worse, we're usually not even aware of this confirmation bias or my side bias. This surreptitiously is that spelled wrong? I have a feeling it's spelled wrong. Surreptitiously meddles with our life. Somehow we just seem to happen to be surrounded by people who all think alike. Not on purpose, of course. We just spend our time with people we like. And why do we like them? Correct, because they think like us. We just seem to happen to read the publications that tend to confirm what we already know. Not on purpose, of course. We just try to stick with good, intelligent texts. And what makes us think that these texts are good and intelligent? Correct, because they make sense to us. We look around and just cut out disconfirming facts without even noticing what we don't see. Very much like the same city can one day be full of happy people and the other day full of miserable ones, depending on our mood. Confirmation bias is a subtle but major force, as the psychologist Raymond Nickerson puts it. If one were to attempt to identify a single problematic aspect of human reasoning that deserves attention above all others, the confirmation bias would have to be among the candidates for consideration. Nickerson, 1988. Even the best scientists and thinkers are not free from it. What sets them apart is the mere fact that they are aware of the problem and do something about it. The classic role model would be Charles Darwin. He forced himself to write down and therefore elaborate on the arguments that were the most critical of his theories. During many years followed a golden rule, namely that whenever a published fact, a new observation or thought came across me, which was opposed to my general results, to make a memorandum of it without fail and at once, for I had found by experience that such facts and thoughts were far more apt to escape from the memory than favorable ones. Owing to this habit, very few objections were raised against my views, which I had not at least noticed and attempted to answer. God, I mean, I could just write a fleeting note on that right there. This is a good primarily mental technique to deal with confirmation bias, but we're looking for ways to implement insight into our psychological limitations in an external system. We want to make the right decisions without too much mental effort, very much like Odysseus, who made it impossible for himself to follow the luring singing of the sirens by getting himself lashed to the mast of his ship. With a good system, the mere necessities of the workflow will force us to act more virtuously without actually having to become more virtuous. Confirmation bias is tackled here in two steps. First, by turning the whole writing process on its head. And secondly, by changing the incentives from finding confirming facts to an indiscriminate gathering of any relevant information, regardless of what argument it will support.
And that's such another powerful idea for writing. If you want to be authoritative, if you want to be taken seriously as a writer, being able to question yourself and don't always buy your own BS and don't fall into your own confirmation bias is such a critical thing. So that's like excellent advice.
Adding on to that, how do you be more present about managing your confirmation bias? Like, you know, one thing I've noticed, like when I first started kind of being more intentional about reading, was like people on Reddit. So the people that write really well, they might not know what they're talking about, but because they write so well, it becomes compelling. And if it relates to an idea or like a belief or side that you back, it then kind of almost fools you into falling more into what you believe. So I have a question is like, what are some strategies that people might have to be more conscious of the confirmation bias and kind of question or almost like subconsciously challenge the information that you're receiving? whether it be like, I feel like misinformation exists everywhere, whether it's through social media, with COVID, with, you know, all the news, but also with literature as well. And potentially there might be things that you might think are accurate, but it's like, what if it's just reaffirming one of your biases? That was really long-winded.
For me, I think anyone that has that sense of, to me, that those are bullies. You know, you have this influence, and then you're not doing the due diligence to figure out what the downsides are, and then you're sort of spreading this information, this misinformation, misinforming more people, in which they buy into it, and then they get hurt. And to me, that's a bully. You know, it's like, give me your lunch money. If you want to know this, give me your lunch money, and they beat you up, and then you don't get anything from it, except for a bruised, you know, effect. I truly believe, like, I think a lot of the times the reasons that I've personally been able to sort of expand outside of my own comfort zone is because of my upbringing and my past and my alcoholism and drug addiction. And a lot of the tenets of that is being present, but also being open-minded. And it's the people that have given me the sort of the sharp pains in my sides that have really opened up to me what I'm thinking about and what I believe. And then also, it's in my actions in my day-to-day. If I can see that my actions where I treat people that can't, if I judge how much I'm cloistered in my thinking by in how I treat people that can offer nothing to me. You know, and what I mean by that is that's a physical manifestation of my thinking, which is thinking is basically the genesis of acting and decision making. So if I can see my behaviors in an open-minded way, then I know that my thinking is correlated to an open-minded thinking, if that makes sense. That's just how I look at it. But even when I read this, I still get a little ting. It's like, maybe I have confirmation bias. Maybe I need to do a little bit more. But I think even just feeling those sharp pains is like telling you that, hey, I am on this. I am looking out for confirmation bias. I am conscious of this and being aware of it. Asking the question is half the battle, kind of thing.
I think
Open to it.
Oh, when you say open-minded, I was going before you said open-minded, I was thinking you were going to say, you know, learn to be critical and skeptical. And I think you have to balance those two things. I mean, I think they're both valuable skills to cultivate, right? You have to be very critical and skeptical, no matter how smooth the talker is, whatever they're pitching, whatever, you know, you're being sold, and it sounds so appealing, and maybe it kind of reinforces some of your existing beliefs, but you have to step back and be as critical as you possibly can be, and skeptical, and say, what am I missing here? You know, what lies beneath the presentation, right?
It's a disciplined approach. If you kind of work at it, and it's something that you got to start to build some practice. I put a couple books in there as ideas if you want to kind of challenge yourself, but just kind of beware that if you do it and you're intentional about it, you'll become impossible, and you won't get invited to dinner parties anymore, because you're going to be like, well, that's bullshit, and that's bullshit, and sorry, that's also bullshit. And then your partner's going to kick you under the table going, come on, baby, just be cool. Let's stay for dinner. And you'll be like, no, that was all just bullshit. And then you'll be like, okay, now I'm too empowered. So just beware.
Hey, I've got 2 friends left.
I'm not invited anywhere.
You just made a bunch of new friends.
One other trick, I'm on a Peter Elbow kick the last couple of days, but he has something he calls, I think it's the believing game, where take something you wouldn't normally agree with and pretend that you believe it, and go, what would someone have to believe this is true? And then see if those things resonate or not. It's kind of an interesting exercise, because that person probably has their reasons for believing it, even if they're not grounded in reality. So it's kind of a way to make it play. And and then you can kind of go back and go, well, does what I thought before still feel right, or did it loosen its grip? Did I loosen my grip on it a little bit by going through that exercise?
I want to add something to that. Like, just as an actor, it's like when we were studying the craft of acting, it's like our teachers always said, you don't ever want to play a bad guy. You don't want to judge the character. And it's that same sort of idea. It's what Roy's talking about. It's like, no, if I was in their shoes, you know, everyone has a overall objective that they're going after. That isn't, you know, they're not just 100% malevolent. They're not 100% evil. No, there's a humanity to them. And if you can bring that humanity up to the surface, and I don't know, that's fleeting note acting. I love that.
Just one thing though, that to keep in mind though, is that if you're always looking to criticize or on the lookout, and you become like vigilante about it, you're going to tire yourself out. And so like, even he talks about, you know, you can only handle so many things. So if you're always on guard every time you encounter somebody's thoughts, you're going to get tired. So I ran across this quote lately. I don't remember the exact words, but basically it really resonated with me. And I think this could be helpful, but it was like, if you don't care about the person's, if you would never ask their advice, then why do you care about their opinion? And so that is a game changer quote for me, because there's so many people I'm like, you know, critical or just analytical, or I'm just like, you're just full of BS and you're so confident about it. But then I was like, I would never ask your opinion. So honestly, I really don't care what you think. And I just like let it, it's like double-sided tape. You just let it slide right off of you and you're just like, okay. So anyway, that's just so there's some truth.
And one kind of add on to that, if you want to put your attention and your energy into something, then I just put a link to a web page where you basically you challenge yourself with being a forecaster. And even though none of us are experts in whatever, check this out, because it comes at the end of Tetlock's book, The Super Forecasting. And this good judgment thing, they put out really quirky questions like, you know, whatever, some random question about, you know, Lebanon will go to war with so-and-so before June 30th. And you're like, what the hell does that all mean? And none of us are experts, but yet it's a way of deconstructing things. Check it out. If you want a place to put your energy into. Uh-oh. Yeah, really. Yes, I am, pretty much.
Well, I was gonna say, I think like the main takeaway that I've gotten was obviously always just thank everyone's for such valuable feedback and like insight. I think the balance of both is definitely something that's needed, in the sense of like, too much critical can make you too negative, and just in general in your personality. And then too much kind of like open-mindedness, because also you run the risk of being potentially gullible. Again, let me know if I'm reinterpreting this wrong, but I do find like that it's like almost with anything, it's like that tension or that dance that needs to happen. And this is just a good reminder to kind of be more conscious of it. So yeah, thank you.
One thing on the idea of being a skeptic. So me personally, I'm like definitely a debater type of personality, where one pitfall that I always play devil's advocate, and I'll do it even though like I don't like exactly believe in the thing that I'm trying to argue for, but I just do it more so like for the mental exercise in a way. So it definitely gets some of my friends like it gets them like pretty angry sometimes. But yeah, I think it's worked out well for me in that I'm just always like skeptical of everything that I hear. And yeah, I always like want to see. I always think about like how could we look at this in a different lens. And one thing I like to do is like in my room, I'll like have a bunch of different lenses, and then I'll like apply them to a claim, and like maybe I could reframe this by looking, maybe with like a design thinking approach, or rational, like there's a lot of different lenses, but that's something that I found that works well.
What if the Zettelkasten was the one place where you didn't have to play any of those roles anymore because you didn't have to? And it was like anytime something would come up, it was because of your curiosity to know more about it. I just feel like once these critical mass of these notes start happening and everything starts clicking, and then, you know, you can start seeing your thinking back out at you, it really does something where, if I could describe it, it's like, there's gonna come a time you're gonna know that the Zettelkasten works when you can confidently, like, look at your notes that you've written and you're like, oh my God, this is me. Like, this is me uninhibited, without lenses, without veneers, without trying to impress, without trying to look smart. It's just me. And all the errors in my thinking, all the great things in my thinking, it's all there.
That was something I wrote early, one of the early exercises, like, what is a Zettelkasten to me? And it followed up with one of your later exercises about go back and read some of your earlier stuff that you've written so far. And what I had written was that the Zettelkasten to me is like a clone of myself, right? I'm making the thoughts at the time, I'm writing it down, and maybe I won't remember them, you know, 6 months from now when I come back and read it. It's like, yeah, oh wow, it's actually pretty good. Or, well, I'm different now, but it's a way to kind of clone yourself for the future.
And the thing is, it's like we're so apt to judge people, right? And it's just like, to see that maybe 6 months ago we weren't right, and to not, I don't know if I can word this right, but it's like, if I can see where I was wrong, then I have a little bit more like passion for myself as who I am as a person, because I have more compassion for other people, because I can see my own lack of thinking in a certain area staring right back at me. I don't know where this conversation is going. We just kind of went on a tangent. We're following a fleeting.
Something that popped out that I was thinking about when we were going through this just now is that photo exercise that you had us do. And I was reading everybody's comments. And so in another lifetime, I was a professional photographer and I traveled. And so when I was looking at the photographs, many of them, I couldn't help but see the reaction to the photographer, and not like everyone was like, this is how they look in their face. And I'm like, no, I actually think this is a little girl who a white man walked up to her face and put a camera in it and started taking pictures of her. And I'm like, you know, when you start to think of it from that perspective, all of a sudden the look they have on their face is quite different than if you just take it as capturing a moment of them thinking something or feeling something. But a lot of those photos are reactions to the people taking the photograph.
I love that, because then I think, you know,
there's that one with the little girl and the little boy, and the way she's looking at the camera, I'm like, I bet it's a white guy taking a picture of her, and she's just like, why are you, like, that's inappropriate in many cultures for a man to just walk up and take a picture of a little girl. So I was just, you know, the way she's looking at him was definitely one of caution. And anyway,
yes,
so
that I could not put a word down, because I was like, what? I could not figure out. I was just like, yeah, I just couldn't process that. I was like, what is there's, yeah, sorry. Yeah. I think you guys saw on my Twitter, yeah. But anyways, yeah.
No, I didn't see your Twitter, but anyway. So Bo, I'd love it if you just keep reading, if we're gonna keep going, or are we gonna stop?
I was gonna stop. I don't know.
Okay.
It's been 2 hours. Do you want to keep going? You want to go for a little bit longer? What chapter are we on here? We're on chapter 10. You want to keep going?
I'm down with finishing the chapter for people that are still up for it.
You want me to keep reading? I don't really want to read anymore.
Okay.
Samantha, would you like to
read? Sure, I can read. The linear process promoted by most study guides, which insanely starts with the decision on the hypothesis or the topic to write about, is a surefire way to let confirmation bias run rapid. First, you basically fix your present understanding as the outcome instead of using it as a starting point. priming yourself for one-sided perception. Then you artificially create a conflict of interest between getting things done, finding support for your preconceived argument, and generating insight, turning any departure from your preconceived plan into a mutiny against the success of your project. It's a good rule of thumb. If insight becomes a threat to your academic or writing success, you are doing wrong. Okay, I got to stop there for a second because I took statistics in university, and so I've read Sonke's books and it didn't click. But right, that's exactly what hypothesis testing. It's like basically you make a hypothesis, but your true end is to make sure you're right. You don't want to disprove yourself, and you definitely don't want a variance. So you're allowed a certain amount of variance in order for it to still be true. And so anyway, that's just like what they're talking about, the social media, where you type in a question on the internet, but you phrase it in such a way that you really want to just get the answer that you're already looking for. So anyway, it just, hypothesis testing is actually that.
Here's a question: is where in relation to Zettelkasten, how does sort of these echo chambers? You know how, like, have you seen Social Dilemma? The movie on Netflix.
That's what I was talking about with the confirmation bias.
Yeah, and it's like it's only getting worse because of all the algorithms, closing in all around us. And so my question is, is a Zettelkasten, is thinking and writing in your own words maybe a solution to that, or could it help change the course of things? What do you think?
I think as long as I guess it's one thing to say, just let your mind go with the fleeting notes, or it's another to say, like, if you were to take a concept or a paragraph and then say, okay, look at it from this way, and then turn it this way, and then turn it this way, and then turn it this way, and then stand on the chair, and then get under the chair and lay on your back. Like, now that would, I think, help from that. But like I'm from church background, and often there's an argument about whether women should be in leadership. They'll say why women shouldn't be in office. And they'll search it and they'll be like, everything on the internet says that women shouldn't be in leadership. Well, that's because you wrote it in a way women shouldn't be in leadership. And then that's exactly what it's going to return back to you. So it's just like, it's sort of like that. So you have to, I've been very careful that when I'm searching something out to try to rephrase it different ways to see if I get a different outcome.
Got it.
User research talks about this a lot, of like not to have leading questions, of trying to make it the most objective as possible, because it can be so easy to influence someone's perception.
Well, that's like questionnaires, they do statistics and questionnaires are confirmation. It's all the time. Like a good questionnaire asks the same question multiple different ways and the number system flips. But once you have 5, 5, 5, 5, people are just going to keep doing that, and then you're just going to get the result you want. So anyway, I digress a little bit, but something that with the fleeting notes, by taking your time, it does allow you to kind of stop and like take a 360 and then of something, I think, than just kind of letting your brain rule you, I guess. I didn't say that very well. Developing arguments and ideas bottom up instead of top down is the first and most important step to opening ourselves up for insight. We should be able to focus on the most insightful ideas we encounter and welcome the most surprising turns of events without jeopardizing our progress, or even better, because it brings our project forward. We postpone the decision on what to write about specifically and focus on building a critical mass within the slip box. Instead of having the hypothesis in mind all the time, we want to confirm that we've separated tasks and focus on understanding the text we read, and make sure that we've given a true account of its contents, find the relevance of it, and make connections. Only then do we take a step back to look at what we've developed, then make a decision on what conclusions are to be drawn from that. The slip box forces us to be selective in reading and note-taking, but the only criteria for the question of whether something adds to discussion in the slip box. The only thing that matters is that it connects or opens to connections. Everything can contribute to the development of thoughts within the slip box, in addition as well as a contradiction. The questioning of a seemingly obvious idea as well as the differentiation of argument. What we are looking for are facts and information that can add something and therefore enrich the slip box. One of the most important habitual changes when starting to work with the slip box is moving the attention from the individual project with the preconceived ideas towards the open connections within the slip box.
This is what I feel like has been the hardest thing for people to grasp, like a Zettelkasten is, because even here he presupposes that everyone already has a dialogue partner, and getting to that critical mass of notes is the hard part. And I just feel like before everyone can get to that point where they can see the notes relating and connecting, is then they quit and they give up, if that makes sense. I mean, that's just been my experience with watching people and guiding people along, is that it's difficult. I mean, he had no other choice though, because it's difficult to get people up to 60 notes or 50 notes or 25 notes. You know, it's interesting, but it takes time.
This whole idea of emergent, that you keep using these words emergent or from bottom up, has really, really resonated me, especially thinking about education and children and how much we force, you know, this top down idea. And like even a child, could you imagine if when the child was like 2 and you said, you are going to be a carpenter, and everything they do is to just reinforce that they're going to be a carpenter. And so instead of allowing the child to bloom and grow to who they're supposed to be, you've like literally top down said, everything you do is going to become this. So we do this with education. It's like, or you're writing a book. What's your title? So we write the title and then everything has to reinforce. And then we get so frustrated when our brain doesn't want to is just like bucking up against it. And we're just like, I just can't even do that anymore. I don't even want to talk about that. That's boring. Or I'm not interested. But the emergent is quite freeing to just go with your thoughts and then come back and summarize where you are. And no one's going to know that you digressed from your original path. They're all going to think you were like super brilliant because you write everything down, you go, and then at the end, you could, like, remember I was saying that before, at the end, you summarize what you just said, and then you put it at the beginning as an introduction, and everyone thinks you're brilliant because you like introduce the idea at the beginning.
Well, that's why when you write a paper, you write the abstract last, right?
Mm.
Which analogy, Glenn? I was going crazy.
Hey everyone, I'm getting tired.
Yeah.
I'm getting tired, and I still have to put up this video. I'm gonna bookmark it here, and plus we're past on time, and I like respecting everyone's time. We're gonna bookmark it here. I'm super, yeah. I mean, just this entire discussion that we've had tonight has been awesome.
Great session. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just feel like, yeah.
Yeah, my brain's a little fried. Thank you so much, everyone, for answering the questions I had. I feel like I interrupted a lot.
They were good questions.
The intervention on Yuna was the best. Eric, nice to have you.
Michael and I were saying this isn't really a book club. It's like I don't know. We call this something with a journey. It's a something journey. I forget so we keep calling it the journey group.
It really is. It's so good seeing all the familiar faces, and Curtis, good seeing you. Vincent,
Yeah, thanks.
Beverly, Omar, everyone. I see all you. Glenn, Roy. I'm just gonna name everybody. Well, fuck it, right? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna upload this on YouTube, and yes, this catch up, everyone. If you haven't caught up yet, these next couple of days are gonna be. We're gonna rip roar through it. I'm just gonna basically lay everything out. That's what, like today, like tomorrow's video that's coming up. I'm just gonna lay everything out. It's a complete walkthrough of from fleeting note to permanent note, glossing over all the different details, but then it's really to show you how it all works. I think Samantha was talking about this last time, right? I'm showing you how it all works, and then we'll slow down and sort of break it all into pieces. But I think it is important to show you that roadmap of that mechanics, of those mechanics. And okay.
Looking forward to it.
Thoughts? Rick? Any
Yeah,
closing?
looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it too. I mean, the video's done. I just have to upload it and edit it. But how is everyone feeling, by the way, in regards to writing in Rome? I mean, has that become something where it's like you don't even think about it anymore? It's just habitualized, or
I feel like I'm getting more and more used to it now, because I was kind of coming across like I was feeling kind of stubborn in a way, and I was writing before all that in my journal, like in Ulysses, which is just this beautiful blank screen, and so I don't know, I guess it's been several weeks now, but I just made the decision. I'm stopping all this bullshit and I'm going over straight to Rome, and I'm just doing it all in Rome, and I'm just going to go full in.
why?
And so I ended like a 15-year process with that,
What was,
Um,
that switch? What turned that switch on?
I guess it was kind of like I was thinking that initially I was gonna like just do a lot of the writing in Ulysses and then cut and paste it over in Rome, and then I just felt like there was some kind of disconnect there, like I was almost kind of cheating or something, you know. So today I was experimenting with like turning the bullets into document view and just these kind of little psychological tricks and stuff. And then in the Mac process of like doing it split screen. So I'm looking at the Kindle book, and then I have the Chrome browser looking at Rome, and then back and forth like that. And it's just starting to gel more and more for me, like the process of, and this is just the beginning stages of Rome anyway. Rome is going to get so much better 1 year from now or 2 months from now, like technologically and everything. It's going to be prettier and all of that. So like I'm just getting more and more psyched about it as I go along.
Yes. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
It would be helpful sometimes, at least for me, Bo, if you would explain sometimes why you're or what you're doing as you go along. Like sometimes you do, and then I'm like, oh, now I get why he puts the line at the top because
Hold on. Doesn't that force you to go, like, it keeps you engaged though, right?
I suppose.
Today's video is going to be an hour long. It's 59 minutes long. And I literally, every thought that I have, I speak it aloud. So
Okay.
after, check back in with me, DM me, if anything.
Okay.
But yeah, I know what you're getting at. And I feel like I needed to do that before, because I just needed to prove it to yourself that you were going to do this. And now that you've proven to yourself that you're using Rome, you're in there every day, you're writing, and you're learning how to abstract out. Now it's like the easiest part is just figuring out how to do it. Oh, it's just, it goes here, you bring that over, okay, and then you're done.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for leading this, Bo, and with all your energy for the whole time. Thank you so much.
My day 43, I'm gonna probably take a road trip. It's like, I'm not gonna talk to anybody. I'm just gonna get in the car and just drive, and just get lost. This is what I do. And, but for me, it's also, I wanna see this. I mean, every time I close my eyes, I see where everyone's going. And really for me, what solidified more than anything was, I think it was day 21 and day 22 when I had everyone do fleeting and literature notes on your own. And I was reading through all the answers and I was just like, fuck, dude, everyone's getting it, And then I was a big risk last live session just to have everyone like answer questions. I wasn't sure if they were going to answer it, but then it was amazing. Everyone was crushing it. And it was just, that's how I knew that, okay, this isn't about, you don't need little building block. You need the whole shebang, and have it all out there. Give it all to you in the very beginning, and then we'll figure out exactly how that looks. But just give you the whole shebang, right? Everything I know, everything I've learned, all the pitfalls, all the obstacles, all the workflows. Give that all to you, and then from there, I'll let that assimilate and let you sort of take it apart and break it apart and figure out why that is like that. But this last half of these 6 weeks is going to be, I'm just going to attack with, like, I'm just going to give everything I got. It's really what it is. I'm not holding anything back. There's no secret sauce. There's no, you know what I mean?
save a little bit for yourself, Bo, because we want you to be well and we want you to make it to the end. So even if that means you have to give a tiny bit less, which will be very hard for you to do, but your welfare is like more important than anything. So please, honestly, we don't want to see you get burnt out, and we don't want to see you on day 43 plan this big trip and you lay on it and you literally stay in bed for a week to recover. So
listen, I know how to treat myself. You know, I'm an artist. I know when I'm like, you know, I slept in today. Come on. I had a Starbucks today, Samantha, you know, with a peanut butter jelly sandwich. Like, come on, I know how to treat myself. But it is really seeing the transformation that I see with all of you.
take care of yourself though, because you're no good to everyone if you're not taking care of yourself. So
Yes,
sending you extra love, like we want you to take good care of yourself. So
I received that. I'll take that. Yeah,
great.
I think this was a great session. I'll have this uploaded. If ever, you know, let's keep hammering away. And again, tomorrow's lesson, you know, watch it a couple times if you need to. It's going to be dense, but I did my best to sort of just walk through every little detail, and then we'll go back this week and mine all that out. But at least you have the roadmap in front of you.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you, Bo. Good night.